right, so,
Let me take this over.
Sure. and don't forget your,
And I better have my caffeine.
yes. Okay, so I'm gonna turn more specifically from this really nice broad overview about what mindfulness is and what it isn't to more specifically what we do with learning to breathe. And then I think we'll take a quick break and then we'll get into the overview of each of the individual themes, which is what we'll spend most of today doing. And so this is a nice graphic to kind of illustrate the differences between intervention and prevention programs. So the idea being that intervention waits until the child has fallen into the water and then you throw them a life preserver. We intervene when there's already a problem. Whereas a prevention approach equips children with the tools they need, the life vest, before they're actually in trouble. And so Learning to Breathe was designed to be a universal prevention program, a life vest to deal with the challenges that we know, some of which are inevitable. In adolescence, they're going to be emotional challenges, they're going to be stressful situations, and we can all be better equipped to deal with them. But it also can be used as a more targeted intervention program too. So it works well kind of in both of those situations, and there's growing evidence base for both of it as a prevention and an intervention strategy. So I want to talk in a little bit more detail about the 5 primary goals of Learning to Breathe that are listed here, and of course they're all interrelated. And so really key to Learning to Breathe, so it's really intended, it was designed to address the gaps that Doug reviewed about programming for adolescent emotional distress. And so key to Learning to Breathe is helping teens with emotion regulation and promoting emotional balance through better emotion regulation skills and really providing opportunities to practice. Related, a goal is to strengthen attention and performance to really build executive functioning skills, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we get into some of the themes. Also supporting pro-social behavior, and so behaving in ways that kind of help others and not just ourselves. And a lot of this is through the compassion for self and other practices that come up in Learning to Breathe. Key also to mindfulness training broadly and Learning to Breathe specifically is building stress management skills with the hope that we can increase our distress tolerance. If we're better able to manage stress, we can manage things that are unpleasant without suppression or avoidance and handle them a little bit better, which helps us in the long run, and we'll talk a little bit more later about some specific ways that happens. And then together, if we have better emotion regulation, our executive functioning skills have been strengthened, we have greater compassion for self and others, and are more pro-social, and we're better able to deal with stress. The hope is that we have better health and well-being overall, that we see mainly through incorporating mindfulness into the daily life. So this is the goal, the overall goals of Learning to Breathe that we hope the program does across the themes and then carries over once the theme is over. So Learning to Breathe is an acronym. Breathe is the acronym part. And so we're going to talk about the ways that the acronym lines up with the themes that are covered. I'll mention this a little bit later too. Learning to Breathe can be done in a variety of number of sessions. It was also first designed to be implemented within the school. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how much time is given to each individual theme. We'll mostly focus on the 6-week program. That's what we have all done to date. And so there's 1 week given to each of the themes, which the Breathe aligns with. So the first theme is B for body. Then R for reflections or thoughts. E for emotions. A for attention. T for tenderness. H for healthy habits of mind, with the goal of building towards the E, which isn't a specific week that you focus on in the program, but the goal is that all of these build to the overall goal of empowerment or gaining the inner edge. And so if we're better able to incorporate mindfulness into our lives in all of these ways, that we are better able to kind of deal with the challenges that life throws at us and more empowered in that way. So to talk in a little bit more detail about what is the real focus of each of these themes. Starting with body. So this first theme is when we really introduce a lot of the ideas that came up in kind of the review of mindfulness, that mindfulness is a special way of paying attention, review what that special way of paying attention is. And it's opposite of mindlessness, so what each of those is, which one we're more likely to practice, and how, which is mindlessness, and how can we practice mindfulness more. And really starting the journey of mindfulness in this program by paying attention to what's happening in the body. Then in the second theme, the real focus is on the idea, and for some people some people are aware of this, some people aren't, that our mind is constantly chattering, and our mind is always producing thoughts, and that we can handle that constant chatter through mindfulness of thoughts and mindfulness of our reflections, and attention paid in this week to how we can observe our thoughts with curiosity and then let them go, that we don't need to hold on to them to solidify them and elaborate upon them. Then in the third week, we turn to emotions. So taking a lot of what's been learned about paying attention and not holding on and letting things go to these early weeks and applying them to our emotions with some beginning practice of how to do that with unpleasant emotions. With the idea that introduce that emotions are like energy surges in the body that come and go, and we can mindfully pay attention to them, we can observe them, we can understand our reaction to them. Are they pleasant, are they unpleasant, are they neutral? But we can notice them in that way and let them pass on rather than trying to push them away or avoid them. The next, in attention, is where there's some real focus on stress management, and also some psychoeducation about stress management, what stress is, where it comes from, the fact that it comes from things both inside of us and outside of us. Sometimes we focus on the things outside of us that are stressors, but we also create stress for ourselves, particularly through the perceptions that we'll come back to later. And using the skills that people have learned through the first three themes of paying attention to the body, to thoughts and emotions, to actually deal with stress. So that's a tool that can be used in stress management. And then the last kind of new theme that people are introduced to in learning to breathe is tenderness. And in addition, kind of building on this idea that we can reduce stress through our mindful attention, we can also train our attention to build healthy habits of the mind, particularly being kind and compassionate to ourselves and to others, which can help us feel much greater balance. And so non-judgment and curiosity is part of all of the weeks of learning to breathe, all of the themes, but it's in this one that there's a real focus on bringing that non-judgment to real compassion for yourself and other people. And then the last week is to some extent a review and a way of pulling together everything that's been learned across the program, with the goal of focusing specifically on how to practice mindfulness in every aspect of life, kind of every day, which of course is critical if mindfulness is going to help you, is to really start using it in the day-to-day life. Which brings us a little bit to what the actual structure of a learning to breathe session looks like, and they're similar. So this is regardless of whether 6, 12, and 18 are the most common number of sessions. Again, we'll focus on 6 with varying amounts of time. And this is designed to be flexible so that it could be incorporated into the school day, into curriculum, which is one of the really nice things about the program. But the structure is intended to be relatively similar regardless of those other differences. And so the idea is to begin with a short mindfulness practice to bring everybody together, to really focus on the present, be mentally in the same place at the same time, to review the theme for the day, to recap what happened last time, and make sure everybody kind of understands what's going to come and what the focus is going to be. Then the wrap up at the end is a longer mindfulness practice, kind of the longest of the session, and a focus on some real attention paid to the importance of home practice, really making it clear to program participants how important it is that they are practicing at home, and giving them specific examples and ideas and guidelines for the types of things that would be good to practice to really start to implement the general ideas that happen in the group meeting in their real lives. And this first session, or this first chunk, if you're thinking about 45 to 50 minute program or meeting time, that would take about 10 minutes. This would be about 15 minutes, so the bulk, about 20 to 25 minutes in the middle, is activities and discussion. And what's really important to understand about learning to breathe is it's designed as a guided discovery approach, which means as a facilitator, your goal is not to tell people about mindfulness, to teach them about mindfulness, but to create conditions in which they can practice and better understand mindfulness and its benefits. And that's kind of the meat of where a lot of this happens, and as we'll talk a little bit as we go and more in our practices tomorrow and Monday, that your goal as a facilitator is also to remind people of the important and active role that they play in these programs, so that it is not you imparting knowledge on a group of teens, but creating conditions that they can connect with each other, they can practice, they can better understand. There is some education, of course, that's part of it, and you guide a lot of these practices, but it's providing opportunities as opposed to teaching. And so Doug already reviewed what the type of mindfulness practices, kind of the broad categories that have received the most research attention, and those are what's reflected in Learning to Breathe as well. And there's a specific order too in which those practices, those categories of practices are taught and structured. And so early on, particularly in these first 3 themes or weeks, there's a real emphasis on focused attention, so on using a particular object, first the body, then our thoughts, then our feelings, to really